Okay, we're gonna try and make a way to make this.
Just maybe depending eventually what I do, like after we graduate, maybe, but it wouldn't be. People started getting like VR goggles and stuff, so I ended up starting to go meet for that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think a lot. No complaints, right? Absolutely. All right, see you later.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome back. Let's go ahead and get started for the day. First of all, I appreciate your flexibility with regard to Monday. As just a reminder, I'll continue to post updates on Canvas if we ever have situations like that come up again, where class needs to be canceled for any reason. In this case, I was stuck on the other side of I-84, headed east. It was officially closed and well below freezing with snowing temperatures. So I headed back Monday afternoon. So thanks for your flexibility on that. Thankfully, that does not change too much in the schedule, but I'll make a couple notes about adjustments based on that change. So as a quick recap, I know it's been a minute, but we did spend some time last week talking a little bit about culture, right? Situating international and intercultural small group communication into our understanding about how groups behave. And we did an activity last week where we looked at some of the different theories about how people behave in groups to suggest ways that we might hire and retain our coworkers. So you might recall from last week, we talked about the idea of a system, right? A system referring to a structure that dictates how members of the group might choose to behave and interact with one another. We used the example last week of Lebanon, which is a country that has a long history of religious and cultural divides. And so its government and structure is set up so that its seats are representative of the different sects and religious beliefs of people in that country. If you're looking for a recent example, yesterday was the annual State of the Union, where the president typically will address Congress in a live meeting, typically to talk about their agenda, their goals, their plans moving forward. It might be interesting for you to know, if you don't already, that a State of the Union is not something that's constitutionally required. It's not something that presidents have to do. Instead, there's a line in the Constitution that a president shall from time to time address Congress. And the actual tradition of a full address is not one that really gained a whole lot of steam until the Reagan era. So it's an example here about how a not necessarily hard-coded rule, but instead a norm develops to explain group behavior, organization, structure, and so on, and how the continuation of tradition is used in such a way that we continue to see those types of meetings. For example, saw a lot of articles and opinion pieces out that were saying things along the lines of, why do we still need a State of the Union? Viewership is going down. Why can't it just be an email, right? So discussing some of the ways that systems and structures change over time and how some of these are developed. We also talked about some theories that help to explain group behavior. Again, theory X is the idea that people are generally unmotivated to work. They're going to do the bare minimum. They have other things on their mind. Theory Y is that people are highly motivated. They're going to do the absolute best that they can at work. And theory Z is somewhere in between. People want to do well in small groups, but they need the support, whether it's social or structural, to help to make that happen. So these theories and approaches to culture are going to be directly helpful for you as you gear up for your small group assessment assignment that'll be due a week from Sunday. So for today, we're going to be shifting gears, and we're going to be spending today and Friday's class talking about problem solving and decision making as it occurs in small groups. Right? Chances are that you have been a part of a small group at some point in your life, and you are certainly going to have to be involved in small groups that make decisions moving forward. Perhaps it's a club and you're trying to make a decision about whether you're going to do a booth or display at Spring Symposium this year. Maybe you are a part of a group that's trying to decide who to hire among a pool of candidates for a job. Perhaps you're working on a school project and you're trying to decide for your class how you're going to structure that project. Perhaps you're a supervisor and you're trying to develop a schedule. There are so many contexts in which we are put into groups for the groups to reach a solution about an issue and develop a plan. So understanding how to do that effectively is really important. One of the worst feelings in the world is trying to work in a group and not be able to do anything, right? Or feel like that time is useless or wasted or inefficient. So I think this week will be useful for us to develop a tool set for understanding how we can effectively work to groups, work with groups on solving problems, reaching solutions, and engaging more efficiently, because a meeting that ends early saves everybody's time. For some quick housekeeping, just given the schedule changes and some things to note here. First of all, We are kind of compressing the week 5 stuff into today and Friday. I'm confident we can work through everything. We have some wiggle room there. The week 5 quiz is available for you to take, and it will continue to be available for you to take up until next Wednesday. Since we didn't get to show up until today to talk about anything in the course, I wanted to extend that deadline for you. The small group assessment is still due on the 19th, a week from Sunday. Remember that that assignment is asking you to think about some of the activities that we've done in class. So even if you haven't been able to attend class for some meetings where we've done these, there are still a number of them that you can draw from. We'll be doing another small group activity today. That'll be another one that you could draw from as you're working through that assignment too. So I went ahead and posted the grades on the small group reflection assignment now that I had the chance to receive all of those assignments from everybody. And in addition to the grades that are posted for you on Canvas, I wanted to give you the opportunity to discuss some of the things that I noticed about these, give you some advice and some feedback that will help you as you gear up for the small group assessment assignment. And the 150 points total, that's 15%. You'll notice it's divided into those different categories on the rubric. So if you have specific questions about why you received the grade that you did, or about feedback on your assignment, let me know, and I'll be happy to share some more details about that. But some things I wanted to talk about. First of all, I thought across the board, people did a really good job of providing examples of specific things that happened in your small groups that connected to some key ideas in the class. So a lot of you were talking about clubs and groups that perhaps you hadn't been a part of for quite a while, but you had the chance to reflect on that experience, share some stories, share some experiences, methods of communication that your group did that really did a good job of connecting to the course, using things like forming, storming, etc., talking about the venue and location where you met, talking about some of the challenges, engaging online and so forth. I felt was really strong. Your use of terms was overall pretty good. There were a couple cases where there were some where folks were referencing Belbin's self-perception, but the term they came up with was not one of those. So if you were running into that issue, I'd recommend just double checking to make sure that you've got those 9 different parts locked in. So one thing that I do want to suggest is continuing to work on in-text and works cited. In class and through a campus announcement, I gave the full APA site for the book. A lot of people were able to use that, but if you were struggling or had some issues with that, I encourage you to use that going forward. Make sure that you're including the in-text whenever you're citing from something that's not common knowledge or not something that's your own experience. So that just helps to trace it to a key part of the text that you're using here. Again, if you were making an honest attempt to integrate those sources and we're running into issues with doing that, I wanted to be flexible and give you some leeway there. But I do encourage you to work on just locking that in and letting me know ahead of time if you've got any issues with completing that part of the assignment. Continue to work on formatting and grammar, right? So a couple tips that I would give you. One of them is what I like to call the 24-hour rule. So I know this is ambitious and not what happens a lot of times in practice, but give yourself a day or at least 24 hours before the assignment is due and step away from it, right? Don't think about the assignment, don't write in any way, come back to it. And there's a good chance that after you've taken that time away, you're more likely to notice any spelling or grammar issues, or you might print out a paper copy for yourself. Give it a day and come back to that printed copy so that you can check it for clarity and revision. I think that that's really useful because oftentimes when we're reading and rereading in our heads and our brains start feeling like mush because we've been writing so much, we're less likely to trace errors. But if we go back to it later, we're more likely to see them with a fresh pair of eyes. So I encourage you to give yourself some time to identify some of those errors. Also, if you have long paragraphs, like over half a page or so double spaced, there's a good chance that you are moving on to a different idea. So it's a good idea to break that up into a different paragraph. So I encourage you to continue to work on some of those formatting points here and just make sure to have things as polished as you can going forward. But overall, I thought that people did a solid job, and I appreciated your integration of these ideas from the course into your reflection. The assessment, again, is somewhat similar, although it's asking you to use some other things from the course along with engaging with some of the activities we've done in class. And then later on in the term, when we do the small group observation, that'll ask you to look at a club or group outside of this course. So we'll be looking at that later on when we get close to the end. So to get into some of the new stuff for today, right, we're talking about how groups are able to solve problems and reach solutions with one another. That's something that in a lot of cases is way easier said than done. Oftentimes we find ourselves in groups where nothing happens, no conclusions are reached, or it takes forever to reach an agreement about something. And I think as a way of framing how groups work together and how we even choose to become members of a group, I think it's useful to think about cost-benefit analysis. So if you're investing, right, you're investing in stocks, typically you put a certain amount of money in, right, you're investing, and then you get your return on investment. So how much you're making through that investment if that turns a profit, right, and say you invest $100, you get 150 out of it because the stock has risen and is more valuable when you go to sell. That would be what would be considered to be a net benefit, where you gain that $50 via your investment. If we think about this in the context of small groups are having to make decisions all the time, and typically they'll use a framework of cost-benefit analysis to reach that conclusion. So for example, perhaps your group is thinking about, like an archery club is thinking about putting together a booth and presentation at this year's spring symposium. Okay. One major benefit would be that you have exposure, you let people you know what you're doing, perhaps you're able to bring in new members, right? But then the cost, you have to set up the booth, you have to get people who are going to be there, perhaps you have handouts and information that you're going to need to print, right? It's going to take some time and money to do that. So you look at those two things and you decide either it's worth doing, right? It's worth the cost because getting new members, letting the group grow is more important, or this is too much of a hassle, we can't do this right now, we need to focus on other things. So we're weighing these options, we're trying to decide which of those is the best. That's oftentimes how groups make decisions, although there's other ways that they could reach solutions too, based on things like tradition, consensus, and so forth. But another thing to consider is that we also apply the same framework to our human relationships and the groups that we choose to be a part of. Say, for example, you tried to form a study group or writing group with some other students, and you find that the costs of that group outweigh the benefits. Like you go to a meeting and it doesn't seem like you get any studying done, you goof off, you're not really focused, and you wonder, why am I doing this, right? That's another way that we're making decisions about our small group membership and participation. We might choose to either lead the group or be less invested in the group such that we feel fewer costs associated with that membership. So this is a framework for thinking about our decision to be in groups, as well as how we make decisions within those groups too. That brings us to the idea of decision making, which again is not easy. Decision making is going to differ depending on your group's goals, its behavior, its structure, and so forth. You're arriving at a position. So for example, right, you might have an organization who releases a statement or a press release surrounding a topic or issue. That would be an example of a group working together to establish their position on something. I oppose or support X that's been discussed on the news, and so on as a group. Secondarily, you might arrive at a judgment. So one really good example of a group that does this is a jury, right? A jury is arriving at a verdict and they're working together in order to figure out that, right? Or action. Are we going to have a spring symposium booth, right? That's something that you and your group members work together to decide on. So there are differences that power and decision-making authority can bring to this. We have to think about how people in a group, not only through experience, but also being in a leader or supervisor type role, might be saddled with the decision-making authority, the one who bangs the gavel, right, and makes the call in ways that other group members don't have. Another thing to think about here is that information is power, right? Knowledge is power, and our ability to know and be aware of specific information related to a decision that other members of the group don't know might be important too. If you're the treasurer of the archery club and you have a budget and you know that your budget is very tight, you might be anxious about preparing a booth for spring symposium because you know that that's going to be money taken out of your budget. So decision making is something we arrive at considering a lot of these factors. So there's a variety of different ways that a solution can be reached, but the one that we don't like and the one that tends to happen more often than we'd like it to is called the plot. I like to think about the plot as kind of like, you're eating an ice cream cone and you just like take a lick and the ice cream just like slides off the cone and just flops on the ground. It's disappointing, it's a waste of time, nobody likes it, it makes you sad. A plot is when you do not reach a solution at all, even if there was a solution that was available that could have solved the problem, right? So maybe your group has wasted time, has not gotten to the issue, has not reached an agreement, isn't sure what to think. There are a lot of factors that can lead to a plot happening. One of the factors might be the inability to come to a quorum, right? In some formal group meetings, a quorum is a number of people who have to be at the meeting for that meeting to be able to vote on things. You have to have X number of people or a proportion of the overall group, or you have to have a certain member of the group present in order to reach a vote. Okay? Another reason a plot can happen is that you just run out of time, right? Sometimes group members will choose to table something in a more formal context, using something like Robert's Rules, when they're not able to reach a solution about an issue. So that might be a way that that happens too. Or perhaps people are in such disagreement that they aren't able to reach anything resembling a solution and decide to put it off until later. Or perhaps it's an issue so contentious that people are not able to rationally discuss the topic. Those can all be things that lead to a plot, right? Again, think about the ice cream falling down. Delegating to an expert, right? So we have seen this used a lot as a strategy in small group settings in the context of COVID-19 over the last several years, right? We had a lot of groups, including state entities, universities, and other institutions, where their decision-making process was to defer to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, or the FDC, or the FDA, right? So they would refer to other agencies and allow experts from those agencies to make the call on an issue. Perhaps there's something that is impacting your budget. Maybe that's a decision that needs to go to your treasurer, right? So sometimes you decide that your group members are not qualified for that issue. You need somebody else who's going to be able to deal with that issue, right? Maybe you're with a group of people and they're dealing with a mental health crisis. There's something you can do immediately, but you need to defer to an expert or medical professional because you're not that kind of doctor. Averaging, right? Averaging or compromise. Oftentimes, we really hate compromise, right? Compromise, being in the middle, is oftentimes the solution that makes nobody happy. There are some situations where compromise doesn't work. There's the analogy, it's like splitting a baby in half, right? Everybody gets half, but you don't have a baby anymore, right? That doesn't always work. But there are situations where compromise does help when there are important stakes or concerns that people have, right? So perhaps somebody says this meeting has to be in person, and another person says this meeting has to be through Zoom, and you decide to do a hybrid meeting. If there's an ability to meet in the middle and reach a solution that people are somewhat okay with, maybe you can do that. Voting, right? Voting is done in a lot of situations where you can't figure out a consensus or agreement between everybody. Sometimes you might also do an anonymous vote or a straw vote in order to see how people feel about a topic going in and if people change on their topic. That's a common strategy that people might use in a jury, right? In the case of that 12 Angry Men play, 11-1, the jurors thought that the defendant was guilty, but one didn't, and that was used to start the discussion. So voting can be a starting place for discussion or an ending place. Voting can either be through a majority, right? 50% plus one, 2/3. Some groups, depending on their structure, do require a 2/3 majority. There has to be a significant amount of support, or what's known as a plurality. Again, it might not be the vote with the majority of support, but if there are 3 or more options, it's the one that has the most support out of those available. So depending on how the group is structured and its norms and rules, how voting plays out can be pretty different. One example of the ways that we see so much variation in how groups vote is through the United Nations Security Council, right? The UN Security Council has 15 members, 5 of them are permanent, include countries such as the United States and China, while 10 of those rotate. So not only does there need to be 2/3 vote for the UN Security Council, but the 5, what's known as the 5 big veto power nations, have the ability to strike down independently a resolution, right? So that's why a lot of times UN resolution that might be related to Hong Kong, right, might get struck down by China, or there have been a number of resolutions that are related to Israel that the United States vetoes, right? Not making a political statement either way about those, just to highlight how the structure of those meetings and veto power can dictate some of the ways that those group members behave. And then lastly, there's the idea of consensus, right? Consensus is this kind of holy grail. This would be amazing if we hit consensus. At some level, everybody agrees with something. You don't have people who are in disagreement who are having to move forward on something. In a perfect world, everybody's convinced, everybody's in agreement, everybody's chill, they all feel good about something. And that can help for group cohesion and help the whole group feel behind the decision that's made. Yeah, let's do this spring symposium. But consensus doesn't necessarily mean that everybody agrees for a couple reasons. First of all, you get people who just do not express their opinion or do not feel a strong enough opinion, and as a result, are just going with the flow, right? They are listening to the other ideas and they think, okay, it's reasonable, whatever, let's do it. You could also have people who openly oppose something, but they don't want to get in the way. They don't want to continue to be a stick in the mud, and they recognize that other people in the group are not going to change their opinion. So even though it's not what they would do, they're willing to have the group move forward on something that they are not in agreement with. So consensus can be seen to be a pretty good thing. One way that I like to think about consensus, there is a story that I think does a good job of describing this. You have 2 siblings. Both of them want a single orange that's left in the house, right? One of the siblings wants the orange though, because they want to make orange juice. They want to squeeze the orange, they want to make orange juice, right? The other person, they want the rind, and they want to use the rind to make like an orange peel. They want to candy it and make a treat out of that, right? So on paper, you would think, oh, we can't reach a solution, we can't work together because there's just this one orange and both siblings want it. You unpack, you look at why they want the orange, and you realize that the same orange can be used and shared to fulfill different purposes because they want it for different reasons. That's ideally what consensus looks like. What everybody gets what they want because you find a way to make the interests compatible. It's not always the case. So one of the challenges of reaching a consensus or agreement as a group is that everybody has to know what consensus means. It's not necessarily that everybody agrees, but that everybody is willing to move forward on an idea or proposal. Perhaps that also means that everybody needs to be involved, right? Consensus does not necessarily mean that you have people who are opposed, but don't feel comfortable or safe expressing their viewpoint because they're worried that doing so is going to rock the boat, lead to being ostracized from the group, and so forth, right? Allowing people to participate, be honest, and able to express their views, even if they go against what's perceived upon as being a consensus, is important. One chilling effect you can have as a leader or manager of a group is to say, oh yeah, it looks like we're all in agreement here before people have really had the chance to fully share. Because that puts a lot of pressure on other people in a group who might disagree to challenge that perception, right? You don't want to be seen as the stick in the mud who's drawing the meeting out. You don't want to be seen as the one who's, ruining the supposed consensus. So not jumping to that assumption and giving people the chance to hash things out a little bit is useful. When we talk about groupthink, about the challenges of not letting people express their viewpoints and disagreement in the group setting. Oftentimes, we have a lot of blunders and failures that happen because people had ideas, they chose not to share those ideas, and the group moved forward on an option that was not fully considered. Being patient and looking for mutually accepted ways to solve the problem. Again, what do you do with the orange? Finding a way to work together on an issue is important. And then being earnest about gridlock, right? People might be sedimented and certain of their beliefs and things that conflict. Okay, what can we do to meet in the middle or find something that some people are at least a little bit okay with, right? Recognizing and giving people a space to express their points of disagreement is a challenge, but it can be a way that members of a group are better able to work together. So if you are currently subscribed to a streaming service, or you have a family member to whom you use their streaming account while you still can before Netflix does their thing and like boots you out of it, you might have encountered a challenge, right? You go on Netflix or you go on Hulu or Disney Plus, and there's so many options. You look through all the shows and movies and all of that stuff, and you think to yourself, what do I watch? And you spend like half hour trying to pick what to watch, and then you just go to bed having seen nothing because you can't figure out what to do. That's the idea of analysis paralysis. It's that the overload of information that we have in a group setting keeps us from making a decision. So many factors to consider. You have this big document we have to work through, and you kind of give up, right? Maybe you're asked to present a chapter for a class, and it's a huge chapter with a ton of terms and concepts, and you think, oh, what can I do? I can't present this in class, and you give up, right? So one way we can deal with that is to have a group leader who helps to filter. Here are the crucial things that you need to know going into this meeting. You break it down, or you spend time during the meeting letting the people work together to break down the issue too, right? So the amount of information and the ability of a group to work through that information can sometimes lead to a flop if the groups aren't working effectively. There's also what's known as the Tannenbaum-Schmidt continuum, right? And this is a spectrum of how groups arrive at decisions considering the role of a group leader or manager. Depending on the group that you're a part of, perhaps it's the captain, perhaps it's the coach, they might be the ones that have the ultimate authority and decision-making power, but the degree to which they seek input from other members of the group is going to impact how they choose to engage. On the one end, you have a totally autocratic decision. It has been decided that we'll be doing a spring symposium booth. Who wants to volunteer, right? That would be very autocratic, saying the spring symposium booth is something I chose to do without your input. Surprise, here you go. This is how it is, right? You can think about like if you were a kid and you ever asked your parent why, and they said, because I said so, that'd be very much on the autocratic. Managers selling the decision would be a group who are saying, all right, well, I decided that we're going to do a spring symposium booth, and I think this would be a great idea because it's cheap, it gets us good exposure, and it can increase our numbers, right? They're explaining and justifying a decision, even though they made the decision. They're revealing to you why they did it. We get a little bit more democratic. They're presenting an idea. I think we should do a spring symposium booth. How should we do this? It's opening up discussion a bit more. Get to a more democratic system, right? Where a leader is presenting tentative ideas. We want to increase our membership. Perhaps one way to do it is spring symposium. And we talk about some of the ways that we can do that. Getting more democratic, you might see that a leader is presenting an issue or problem saying, hey, our group numbers are down, our membership needs more exposure. So what should we do? And then to get fully to a participative lens, it might just be allowing the group members to deal with the issue. You're giving them the basic information, membership is down. All right, cool. Let's come up with a solution. What should we do about that? And then the group organically decides that a spring symposium presentation is the way to go. This is not to say that anywhere on the spectrum is necessarily good or bad. There are some times where a leader of a group has to make hard calls, right? They have to be autocratic in certain situations, right? Just to say that it's important to consider context and the appropriateness of the decision that a group leader is making. So in particular, right, if a group leader is making an autocratic decision and there isn't really a good justification for it, then perhaps members of the group don't feel trusted or feel like they're being listened to in the ways that they should. Meanwhile, on the other end, perhaps you have endless deliberation and discussion without structure and without the information that a supervisor could bring to allow the group to run more efficiently. So there's balance depending on the dynamics of the group. Status quo is a term you might be familiar with. Status quo refers to the idea of keeping things how they are. We have a bias toward the status quo, including when we're in a group. In other words, the idea of staying the course and doing things as they have been done in the past. Oh, we've always been doing spring symposium. We always have to. We're going to do it again. Sometimes it's because because it's easier, it's traditional, it's what we associate with being a part of the group. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? That's the appeal of the status quo. But sometimes sticking with the status quo when circumstances change or things don't work can be worse. Oftentimes when people are proposing a change to the status quo, they have what's called the burden of proof. Why is my solution or alternative a better option for the group than what's currently available? Good way of thinking about fighting for the status quo. Somebody's digging with a spoon, right? Somebody offers them a shovel, which would be way better at digging at the dirt. And they say, but I'm already using it. I've already got it, right? It's not working well, it's not efficient, but I'm already using it. Why would I change? So the other person would say, well, because the shovel can get a lot more done in a lot less time. So status quo and changing the status quo can oftentimes be a useful strategy for the group. You might be familiar, if you haven't heard of this already, there is a book that's pretty popular in a lot of marketing and business circles known as Who Moved My Cheese? And it deals with the ways that people might approach and deal with new ideas. And that runs on a spectrum known as neophiles, which are, in this analogy, the mice, who oftentimes embrace new ideas, and neophobes who tend to stick to how things have been and don't embrace new ideas. So I wanted to share a clip that describes some of the ideas from this book, but it's a way of breaking down and understanding how responsiveness for change can help groups to operate a little bit more efficiently.
Who Moved My Cheese is about dealing with change in your work and in your life. Cheese being a metaphor for what you want in life. Everyone has their own idea what cheese means to them, and we go after it because it makes us happy. The maze in the story represents where you look for your cheese or happiness. Your cheese is always changing. You should not get comfortable in relying on your cheese to always be how or where you left it. In doing so will help you deal with change and bring you greater success, no matter how you define success for yourself. The 4 characters in the story represent parts of us, and it's up to you to identify which parts you are now and which you would rather be from now on. There's 2 mice who don't overthink everything and just get on with life. Sniff constantly sniffs out the change and is ready for it. Scurry goes into action immediately without needing to know all the information. Then there's 2 little people, really smart people who've done well for themselves so far. Hen, he likes to stay in a safe, familiar territory. And Haw, who's slow to adapt to change but is open-minded. Sniff and Scurry go out and seek new cheese every day. Hem and Haw comfortably rely on their past knowledge and experience and assure themselves the cheese will be right where they left it. Hem and Haw even moved their house closer to their cheese and built a social life around it. They became so comfortable they didn't even notice what was happening.
So a good analogy of thinking about how groups can adapt, right? That things change. A lot of groups went under COVID, right? Because they didn't adapt and change and modify things like membership or modality to account for a shift to online settings. There are a lot of changes in terms of trends, right? If you are a clothing company that's selling skinny jeans, good luck with Gen Z, right? So being able to adapt and adjust to changes in a group, to consider new ways of doing things, but also to balance it out with your knowledge of the group, what's worked well in the past and why certain traditions exist the way that they do, is a responsibility that group members have to continue to try to maintain. Lastly, before group activity for today, I want to talk about some things known as weakening factors. Those are things that can hurt our ability to work effectively in group settings. One of them is blocking, which refers to the idea that when you're in a group, right, your slice of the pie, like a group of 6, you're speaking way less than you would with one other person. So sometimes over the course of a conversation, topics change, people said something similar to you earlier, or you forget what you said because it's been a long time before you've been able to jump in. So we have less opportunity to share our perspectives because of other people. Another issue is the idea of social matching. Maybe you're really enthusiastic going into a meeting and you see that nobody else is, nobody else cares, and so you bring that same energy into the meeting. Oftentimes we match the behavior of other people in the group to dictate how we should behave. And lastly is the idea of the illusion of group productivity. In other words, we're more likely to rate a group as scoring higher on productivity, getting more done than they actually did, right? Oftentimes we think, oh, people are talking, neurons are firing, things are going on, but you don't really get as much done as you might think for yourself. So given that, what I'm going to have us do is a scenario here. We've got Madeline, who in a couple weeks has her 5th birthday. Hooray! She's living in LeGrand, and what your group is tasked with is trying to develop and prepare a birthday party. What you know is that Madeline is a big fan of reading, basketball, and Disney films. That's about all you know about Natalie. So with that information, I want your group to take about 10 minutes or so to brainstorm ideas for how to host Madeline's party and develop a plan on how you're going to be hosting that party for Natalie. So let's see, we've got 5, 16. So let's do 2 larger groups today. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So take about 10 minutes to chat with your group members, share your ideas, and arrive at a decision about how you want to host this party.
Oh, I think it's safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, if they're kind of sporty like that, reading doesn't need to be a party. So I kind of kept that for now. Because it's just not a group activity. Right, and then we could probably just be kind of like that. Just like kids do, okay, maybe bounce it out.
I mean, I bet you could buy basketball in Disney products.
For like Airbud or something.
Yeah.
Cool. That's a good idea for that. I
I don't think that would be a party.
You can get like that.
Airbud. For 5-year-old.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking.
And it could be like, and then it's
That might dress up as princes and princesses.
yeah.
Basketball or something.
It was just 50 pounds when I was a kid, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like costume guy. I actually, I don't know. But yeah, I'd say basically just outdoor themed party.
I'm thinking.
Could give her some sporty or book stuff as kids, basically. And then work together to arrive at a decision on how to host Madeline's party. And then the same question is, yeah, it's kind of lock it in place. I would say for you.
Yeah. I don't know if it would be like guy or kind of like.
Oh.
Oh, everybody.
Yeah. So on that, though, like people in the fight, like a lot of fans, right? I think, yeah, I have a lot of friends. Also. Yeah, I would want someone look. Probably, like your classmates or friends, and then there'd be like all family there. And, like,
Also, if there's.
well, they don't get them come.
Yeah, we can do that, like, transition part wise, and I'm not here, but.
Probably just like invitations, right? Like little things like that stuff.
There you
Like,
go.
Yeah.
yeah, so give out invitations. Right, right. Okay, yeah, I think that is something. You got it pretty well, like that. I feel like, yeah, I think maybe have some basketball, bouncy house, theme party, theme day, stuff like that.
Sounds like groups are mostly about wrapped up. I'll give you another minute or two to finish and have somebody ready to share. So I'd love to hear the ideas that your groups came up with and reached about hosting this party. Let's start here on this side. What did you all come up with?
Oh, sorry. I totally thought you were pointing to the
Oh,
other side
sorry,
there.
sorry.
Yeah, basically what we went over was, it's a theme, she likes Disney, so we were thinking kind of a theme party, theme cake. One of those maybe theme bouncy houses, because they've got those Disney ones now.
Yeah.
And, so that'll be fun. Reading doesn't really work good as a party, like group activity thing. So we were like, we could maybe give some books as a gift or something,
Yeah.
but not so much worried about it as actual part of the party. And then, sports, maybe like a more outdoor party, because they're little kids and they're kind of messy and energetic. So just having them outside and doing stuff is better. And then, on how to host it, we figured, it would be kind of invite only type deal, invite the classmates and the friends and the family and whatnot. But yeah, it sounded like a pretty simple deal.
Yeah, okay. So I really like the group's ideas here. And one thing that I particularly like that your group was able to come up with here is I could tell that there are folks in the group who have like worked with kids or have siblings and have those types of relationships, realizing things like, oh, well, it's going to be messy. Books might not be the best for them to do during the party, right? Finding ways to facilitate how 5-year-olds might be. Like your ability to pool together these ideas and think about some of those constraints and factors in those ideas. If you didn't have folks that work with kids, you might not have that same context for developing an idea as a group. So your ability to think through and troubleshoot some of those ideas and ways to work around them, I think is a big advantage to developing these ideas and problem solving in a group setting. How about over here on this side? What do you all come up with?
Yeah, ours was pretty similar to theirs. But so we first thought, essentially like Disney film, we got like a Disney themed party, just like your favorite Disney characters. And then we thought essentially like Spafford, we do it on the park where you can like kind of play outdoors, maybe like a smaller group, because I doubt any of the 5-year-olds could reach the main group. We could recommend gifts as like books for 5-year-olds that like Disney, also relate to there. And maybe like a cake or like a pinata theme to like Disney or basketball.
Okay, that's awesome. The way that you're incorporating like the Disney factor and getting kids who are into Disney in creative ways, I think is a really good one, right? Helping you to think outside of the box and work together as a group on ideas that you might not have been able to come up with on your own. I always love when I did this last year, I had a student who in their group came up with this whole elaborate plan of how they were actually going to pick up LeBron James from the airport in Boise and like drive him into town to be at the party. And they like had all of the logistics lined up about who's going to pick up from the airport, who's going to drive back. It's very silly, but it's fun to think about how we're able to work together on developing some of these ideas, problem solving and troubleshooting as a group. So for your attendance activity for today, you're welcome to return to your seats if you'd like. You can write or type this. I want you to take some time to reflect on this, right? So first of all, what went well in this brainstorming process as a group? We talked a little bit about some of the weakening factors, right? Did they impact your group and the way that your group communicated? And lastly, how do you feel about how your group arrived at a decision? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? How do you feel about how that process went? I'll give you about 5 minutes or so to reflect on this and share some of your ideas here as we're wrapping up. So as you're wrapping up, we took some time today to talk about decision making, the ways that group members work together on reaching decisions, collaborating, and coming up with ideas. We'll continue to hit on these a bit more next class, talking about creativity and its role in making decisions. You're welcome to continue working on this attendance activity. Once you've finished, you're welcome to email or pass it forward. Once you've done that, I'll see you later and have a great rest of your afternoon. I'll see you again on Friday. Have bright weather and snow, so enjoy whatever the heck is going on out there. And I'll see you again on Friday. Thank you.
I won't be drunk.
Okay. Okay,
but I will be back.
thanks for letting me know.
I also will be around Friday, I feel across tomorrow.
Gotcha. All right, thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's good.
Two.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Kind of funny you just living in the ocean. I was talking to my grandparents about the country because they're from there
Oh, yeah,
and kind of interesting.
yeah, I would imagine.
I haven't lived there for a long time. It's not a very good country, but you know, they left before the war.
Hmm.
Um,
So a lot of the messiness of
Well,
the,
they left and then they went to visit like just as the war broke out
yeah. Mhm.
and they got stuck there for like 3 weeks
Wow.
and then they managed to get out. But they actually had some family who died in that war. Like,
Wow.
yeah,
Yikes.
yeah, my mom's a godfather. Was one such individual. But it's like just, you know, like the weirdest war ever.
Yeah,
It's
no
like-
kidding.
Cause it's like, it started because there are a bunch of Palestinian refugees
Mhm.
that were leaving Israel. And a bunch of Christians killed a bunch of them, just massacred them. Because they didn't want them all coming in and the Christians ruled the country at that point. Because the French had essentially cemented a Catholic rule in the country.
Hmm.
And then, so a bunch of militias, and then a bunch of the Sunni Muslims. So the Sunnis are like, no, you can't do that. And so then they start fighting back. And then everyone just starts fighting, everyone. And then Syria tries to annex the country.
It's
The country never recovered from that. Like economically, logistically, never recovered.
no.
I mean, they lost a fourth of their population either from death or from fleeing, mostly displacement. I think 1 million people left the country, and it's a country of like 4 million people. It's just like on a map, it's like this small.
Yeah, yeah. And speaks to the problems of trying to represent all of that
Yeah, I don't know if that's the
government.
best. I don't know if that's the best way to be doing things.
Yeah, it seems like it hasn't worked very
They
well.
just put quotas, and
Mhm.
it's like, I don't think, and you're not gonna get the best people involved, maybe,
Yeah.
because you're essentially artificially limiting who can and can't run in
Mhm.
which districts. And then